All right. All right. Your attention, please. I'd like to begin, if possible. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, new change today. I am video recording this lecture. I am going to be putting it up on my YouTube channel at a later date, probably tomorrow. Hello, come on in. No trouble. This is like, this is an experiment to see if it works in this format. I wasn't doing this for a while because it's like, I don't know if it really works with like taking breaks for like you guys to work on stuff, you know, because like
elevator music.
Yeah. Well, see, I don't want to do
You don't want to edit it.
any editing at all. I just want to take a video and immediately put it up on YouTube because that's what I do.
Well, then that can be the student's problem. If they're going to look at your video.
Right, they can zip through it. Yeah. So thank you, dear listener. Thank you, dear viewer. It's your job to find out the interesting bits in this video. So, all right. There's probably going to be a lot of like comments on the video from like my old students at the university. You know, they started a change.org petition to get me back at the university when I left.
Come on, really?
Yeah, really. It's funny. They started #FreeMoore. But you know, I don't really want to go back to McMaster University because turns out after I left, they thought it was appropriate to withhold my pay for certain things. So,
Oh, God.
yeah.
Definitely don't.
I like it here. I get my paycheck on time. So, you know. So, as you can see, I have a much larger gesturing stick today, so this should be a good lesson. Still don't have my lightsaber back, but
You get a real lightsaber.
well, I mean, yeah.
Not like real. But
No, like a toy.
Like an actual fake lightsaber.
Yeah, not one of the expensive ones though. Just a plastic one is fine. If it lights up, even better. Anyway, so we have a few things to get through today. Our first topic will be JavaScript components in Bootstrap, how to integrate that into a web page, seeing as that is a requirement for your second assignment. How did the first assignment go, by the way?
Good.
Not bad, yeah. Pretty, yeah, straightforward. Simple. Yeah. So far, so last semester, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I haven't marked them yet, so remains to be seen, but,
Well on our end.
yeah. So, assignment number 2 is basically a selection of JavaScript's programming problems, which are not too far outside of what you had seen in programming fundamentals last semester. The difference is, of course, it's in JavaScript. And also, you're required to use a Bootstrap JavaScript component. We're going to do an example of one of these components first, and then we shall talk about JavaScript, the language, which, you know, if you get like strong, wow, he really dislikes this language vibes, like, I don't know, I'm developing a hatred of JavaScript almost in comparison to my hatred of Python. I think I just don't like scripting languages because both of them, like, JavaScript is very similar to Python in a lot of ways, but worse somehow. So, you know, we'll have fun exploring that. But any questions before we get started?
JavaScript is object-oriented though, isn't it? Not really?
Yes, I mean it has objects.
Okay. Not in the same way Java is.
Do you know what a JSON
Yes.
is? So, like, basically, what Python considers a dictionary inside of a JSON file, JavaScript considers that to be an object.
JSON object.
Yeah. Yeah, well, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, right? So it's the notation of objects. So anything, so what Python considers a dictionary, JavaScript considers, basically you just have a bunch of key value pairs, and that's an object, an object type. Then you attach methods to it somehow. We're not going to cover that in this course. We're barely going to get into JSON as something you return from AJAX calls towards the end of it. So, getting off topic. So let's see how to use a Bootstrap JavaScript component. If everybody in the room could please fire up VS Code, we'll do a in-class technical demonstration. Not going to upload this to the server or anything like that. So, you want to make a new HTML file. Let's call this Bootstrap JS demo.html. You can see I was doing this with my other class. I very cleverly decided to record the second time I'm teaching this material this week, so that it's a little bit more smooth delivery. So, VS Code, we have created our HTML file in a new folder. Once again, to insert your HTML boilerplate, it's !tab. For now, Bootstrap Carousel demo. We're going to be demonstrating how to use the Bootstrap Carousel component. Can anybody tell me what a carousel is?
Horses.
I mean, that's like an actual physical carousel.
An image gallery that slides from image to image?
Yes, an image gallery that slides from image to image. Some of you may be familiar with the Steam homepage, the Steam store page. At the top of it, they've got a carousel that populates with your recommended games. That's what a carousel looks like. So this is a Bootstrap component. So we will need to acquire the Bootstrap Content Delivery Network links. Links plural this time. So get bootstrap.com, scroll down a bit, include via CDN, copy this, paste into your head, not your head, the HTML file's head, copy and paste. The whole point of the copy-paste operation is that these characters never have to enter your head, your actual physical head. So, the first one links our CSS rules. You can see it's link href, similar to how you link a style sheet in a sort of a general sense. The second one is script. Script, source, and then we have our web page we're getting, or our URL we're getting the JavaScript from. Without the JavaScript, the carousel won't work. Up to now, we haven't needed the JavaScript because we haven't been working with any JavaScript components. Make sense? Okay. So, this is the one and only time that you're allowed to do this in this course. We need to copy the code template for the carousel off of W3 Schools and into our document. Normally, copying things is strongly discouraged, but in this case, I'll allow it because it's complicated and, you know, we don't want to deal. So, Bootstrap Carousel W3 Schools. Now, here's a problem, right? if this is all you Google, this will actually take you to the version 3. The version 3 Bootstrap Carousel object. This is incorrect, wrong, and probably won't work in a number of interesting ways. In order to get the current version, you have to specify Bootstrap 5. So please, 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 when you're going out and getting your Bootstrap JavaScript components, please make sure you are using the correct version of Bootstrap. Bootstrap 5 carousel. There we go. So if you wanted to see what a carousel looks like, this is what it looks like, with various people at, you know, a band or something. I don't know, who cares? So you have all of this example code. Just yoink it, just like this. Ooh, ooh, there we go. Copy, copy, pasta. There we go. Now, at this point, literally the only thing we have to do is to replace the image files with image files that we actually have. So, in advance of this class, I acquired some images off the internet. Please take this opportunity to grab 3 images from Google Image Search, safe for work, please, and download those to the same folder that you have your HTML in. For my part, I have a picture of a mallard duck, a picture of a wood duck, and a picture of 2 cayuga ducks. 3 species of iridescent waterfowl. Ducks also make excellent comedy animals. So there we go. Give you a moment. Put your hand up when you've got your pictures. This would be the time that I would splice elevator music into the video if I was, you know, concerned at all about doing any editing whatsoever, which I'm not. If the school wants that kind of production value, they can bloody well pay for it. Of course, you know. Anyway, so very simply, all you have to do is to put your image file names here where it says source. The comment you're looking for is the slideshow carousel. So, duck 1, duck 2, duck 3. Now, if we launch our HTML page, you see our duck is there, our controls are there. The carousel is designed to hold on the first page for a set amount of time and then begin flipping through the slideshow reasonably quickly. So without further ado, it should start flipping soon. But anyway, this thing is too large, right? So we should shrink it down. So, does anybody remember how we center a image in CSS?
How we what?
How do we use center an image in CSS? Yes?
Margin auto.
Margin auto. Very good. So, the demo code which has been downloaded from W3 schools puts everything inside one big div and attaches the ID demo to that. So, that's something we can grab using our CSS rule. Demo. There we go. Now, let's say width is equal to 50%. Or it's I always forget that. Margin left, auto, margin right, auto. Then, reloading the page, you can see it's centered and 50% screen width. You can flip through, and there are our ducks, or whatever it is that you've selected. Any questions?
Can we go back to the code?
I most certainly can. Ah, there you go. See, it's flipping.
So do the pictures have to be a certain size for them to store? Because I think mine is.
So the way that it will work, it will, like this is a low resolution picture in comparison to the other ones. No matter what the image resolution is, it will stretch it to fit the width. But if they're of inconsistent heights, you'll have the size of the carousel will vary depending on what image you're on. So, in order for the thing to look very nice, very clean, please make sure that all of the images that you're flipping through have the same aspect ratio. Right? Can somebody define aspect ratio for me? Nope. That's resolution. Yeah.
At least I tried.
No, that's true. That's fine. That's good.
It's the weight and height of the image, maximizing it or minimizing it so that pixels won't get.
Yeah. So the aspect ratio is the height divided by the width. Or it might be width divided by height. At any rate, images with the same aspect ratio are stretchable to the same size container. So, yeah.
When you put the images into the same file, like when you save the HTML file, and you have all the images that are inside the same file, does it matter if they're in another file themselves called photos?
Yes. And please distinguish between files and directories.
Sorry, directories.
Yes. Yeah, so in this example, let's run through that quickly too. In this example, I have all of my image files in the same directory as my HTML file, and my source attribute is just the file name. If these were in a subfolder or a subdirectory, there we go. Say images or image, and I sneak those in there. You'll see, well, okay, that's not Los Angeles. Also be sure to modify the alt text from the default. So, mallard, duck, wood, duck, and Cayuga, duck. you can see that's broken our image links, right? To get our images back, we simply specify the relative file path to the image locations. So in this case, that's image slash .1, image slash .2, image slash .3. And they're back. So if you want a slightly better organized website, that's how you do it. Question?
What's the difference between dot slash image slash .3 versus image slash .3?
Dot slash? Oh, so this is so what I'm about to say may not seem relevant because you might be a Windows user, but since CS Unix is an Apache server and a Linux server, this is how things work on the server. So basically, there are two default file names that occur in every directory. So if I go into my teaching 10.259, there we go, examples, just, no, it's C10.259, there we go. Go into examples slash Bootstrap JS2, there we go. That's our current, this is our current directory, right? If you list with the A flag, A means all, which means it also lists hidden files, folders, and directories. So you'll see that this introduces dot and two dots as directory names. Dot is always, always, always this directory. So to say dot slash is to say relative to this directory. Normally, it's omitted. Two dots is up one level. So if you want, for example, to view a file in the directory above, you can view /ajax.js, which just happens to be a file that I have hanging out in the directory above. So that's what those two mean. The convention in Linux is any file or folder name which starts with a period is hidden. So you need to use the -a to view it. Make sense? Cool.
So can you help me with something here, please?
Yes.
Copy the case.
Show me your code.
Maybe it's because they're, yeah, like one of the.
Yeah.
It's like
So it's just kind of listing.
So then I just read that.
Okay.
And the document.
If
Let
I
me bring
were
up
to
my
say
code.
try,
So whatever I was trying to figure
I
out.
don't know if because they're different ratios, but I would say maybe.
You just have to box order.
That's my this page. That's the file.
So you have carousel inner,
Yes, I do.
you have carousel item and active,
Yep.
and each one of these has carousel item,
Yes.
and we have B block with W100.
Yes.
Very strange. Try reloading the page.
I've tried different pictures and
Are your photos not working either?
they're just laid out like this.
His aren't even showing
Mine aren't
up.
even showing. So I have,
I said maybe it's because of the aspect.
so I have the page there, I have my photos, and here's like 3, and then I have them here the exact same. And I didn't delete anything, I copied the.
Show me your, show me what this looks like on the page.
Oh.
Wait, go back. Yeah, did you change the elements?
Did he say that? Oh, so it's.
So this is not the right page that's being loaded.
Bootstrap JS
Double click. All right, yeah, go back. Where, okay, so you've got,
Users
this is downloads.
Just copy and paste that code and.
Or just find it here. You were loading the wrong file. That's the file.
So now,
I would.
Boom.
ah,
Do it like a.
All right.
Okay, you're gonna have to reload it into VS Code. Drag and drop that.
Like it's not applying the static. Those are not inside the div. Maybe you're missing that.
I don't know. Like,
You have an extra and divs.
at least for me.
The div got last 15 minutes. That's cool. Not inside the body, just like return. Yeah, div.
Try going back to the W3 schools and grabbing it again. Maybe something screwed up somehow. I don't know. Anyway, anybody else? Everybody get it working? Anybody need a hand? Okay. Any questions? So, in assignment 2, you will be required to use a Bootstrap component which is not the carousel. You'll be using a Bootstrap component. Actually, you have a choice of 5 or 6 of them. But the general idea is that you will have a bunch of panes or cards or divs or things that contain JavaScript coding problems, and they'll be able to pop in and out dynamically based on which Bootstrap component you choose. Make sense?
Yes.
Shall we do some JavaScript now?
Yes.
Wonderful. The reason you're all here. Good.
That's the only thing I know from JavaScript. Console.com. Yeah, see?
Yeah, well, I mean, you gotta start with a hello world, right?
You said that in JavaScript semicolons are optional, correct?
Correct.
But it's probably just better practice to put them in,
Yes.
unless you are a Python programmer.
I mean, yes, I they're optional, so you don't need them, but
Good practice.
it's good practice. It's good practice for the same reason indenting your code correctly is good practice and not actually required, right? Do you know what the semicolon actually is?
End of the line.
Yeah, it's an end of statement operator, right? So someone who's looking for it's like, well, this statement isn't ending, you know? It's kind of interesting. Some languages like SQL your queries can get quite long. So like you might have like 5 or 6 lines and then put the semicolon in it at the end, that finishes the query, right? But, you know, we're not talking about SQL, we're talking about JavaScript. So, I probably said this at the beginning of the course, but I heard or read it somewhere that about 80% of all code written these days is JavaScript. This is due to the overwhelming presence of web applications. Basically, a trend that's been happening over the last few years is that standalone applications have been gradually replaced with web applications. Many apps that you would download on the App Store are really just mini browsers, which are, you know, deploying a web app these days. So, JavaScript is the language of web pages. You don't have any other choices. There have been recent movements to try to improve JavaScript, provide better typing, that sort of thing. Most notably among these is TypeScript. Anybody heard of TypeScript? Yeah. Anybody use it before?
Yeah.
Awesome. Is it better?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So TypeScript is a language that compiles to JavaScript. So it produces JavaScript as its result. That JavaScript can then be deployed in web pages. But even if TypeScript were to acquire, you know, a 90% market share in this type of programming, this course would still teach you plain old vanilla JavaScript because it's necessary to know how it works. Particularly if you're maintaining old code, which is something you'll be doing quite a lot probably. Yes. So JavaScript adds dynamic functionality to web pages. You can insert or remove things from the web page based on user interactions or based on timing events. Event-based programming is a big theme in JavaScript. So as a company that has a website, you are actually incentivized to put a fair amount of your sort of processing into the client side. Obviously, nothing that requires security, because we never, ever, 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 ever trust a client. Never trust a client. Number 1 rule of web security, never trust a client. But any processing, like think about the processing, right? Processing is something that takes up CPU cycles. For a server, you have to do that processing once for every user that's, you know, loading or interacting with this web page. For the client only has to do it once for themselves, right? So anything you can offload to the client in terms of processing is going to reduce the amount of work that your server has to do, which might reduce the amount of servers that you need. It might reduce the amount of air conditioning that you have to do on your server farm. So, you know, presuming you're working with a company large enough to have a server farm. So that's where JavaScript comes in. Any questions so far? So we already covered this on the first day of class, but it's useful to go over it once again. Let's talk about, well, actually, before we get to Hello World, I'll talk about interpretation versus compiling. So everyone, I hope, remembers the discussion we had in Java on the first day, compilers versus interpreters, right? JavaScript is an interpreted language. So, when you execute a JavaScript script, that script gets fed into an interpreter, which pieces it out one line at a time, executes those pieces, not directly in the operating system. Because JavaScript has an interpreter, that interpreter is a piece of software that can be built into other pieces of software. That's how it ends up in web browsers, right? So, if you want access to JavaScript's interpreter, all you need to do is right-click and inspect the page and go to console. The console is extremely useful for debugging your code. This is where all of your messages that you print will appear. This is basically the same thing right here as your command prompt in Java. One of the main differences between this and Java, though, in Java, we tend to take input from the user using standard input inside of the command prompt. Because this is a web page, and a web page can include things like inputs and buttons and all of those lovely nice things, we will tend to take our input using the web page rather than using the console interaction, as you might expect. So, hello world. There are two flavors, console.log, hello world. This is how you print a console message. I know that everybody, well, most of the people in this room are still but wee little babbies when it comes to programming. But one thing you should already see the utility in is inserting print statements into your code to see what the value of variables are. Right? This is the debugger's first line of offense against the dreaded and nasty bugs. Right? If you insert print statements and view what the variables are actually doing inside of your code, this is information you can use to fix your code. And this is how you do it in JavaScript. And JavaScript is a terrible, terrible language, so you'll need to rely more heavily on these types of tricks to help you debug. I will save some of the demonstrations of JavaScript's terribleness for later. But, you know, you can actually see some of its terribleness already. Console.log, hello world, prints hello world. Does anybody know what this undefined means? That's the return value of the call to console.log. So if you wanted to, you could say variable x is equal to console.log hello world, and then x would have the value undefined. So we're already getting into interesting territory. So that's the first way. This is invisible. Most end users will not know that the console even exists, and perhaps we prefer to keep it that way. If you want to produce a hello world that's visible to the regular user, if you want to print something to the regular user, you have an alert box. Alert. Hello world. So you can see, we get this little box that pops up, and in order to proceed, the user has to click OK. While active, the alert box essentially pauses everything. It's actually a bit like a pause button in a video game. All of the scripts underneath and like page rendering and all of that will be halted while this thing is on the screen waiting to be closed. Make sense? So far, so good? Good. So, wonderful. So, it's all well and good to be able to do some silly little tricks in the browser's console. How do we actually put this in a web page? Well, I am so glad you asked. We have the script HTML element. Anything inside of a script element is JavaScript code that will be executed when the browser finds this element. In the same way that CSS rules are processed when the browser encounters them, JavaScript code is executed when the browser encounters it. That's going to have implications later on. But for now, let's call up the VS Code once again. New text file, not text file, new file, call it JS babies first JS HTML. Call this JS folder, fine. Babies first JS, HTML boilerplate, etc. Put in the heading babies first JavaScript. So, we're not quite there yet with managing when JavaScript is executed, but in essence, with JavaScript you have to worry about whether or not the HTML elements of the DOM have been loaded before or after your script executes. If the HTML elements haven't been loaded yet, then the JavaScript can't operate on them, right? They don't exist yet until the browser hits them and loads them. So, for the time being, we will insert our script elements at the end. We will insert our script elements at the end because we're because we're putting the script element at the end. The JavaScript we're writing will be the last thing that the browser processes, meaning that we can process everything else in the page. You had a question?
For JavaScript, won't you use file JS?
Yes, the file extension is JS, but we'll get there. We'll get there, yeah. Yes, as one of your colleagues notes, the normal way to do JavaScript is to write it in an external file and then import it. But, you know, we need to walk before we can run. So, console.log, hello world. And let's also put in an alert. Pop up There we go. Opening the web page, we get a pop-up. Says pop-up. I'd just like to point something out though. I said that this JavaScript would execute after all of your HTML elements were loaded. So where are they?
This is an alert.
Say again?
This is an alert, so it stops all the rest of the code.
It does stop all the rest of the code, yes. But our heading has already been loaded, right? So where is it?
Does that mean JavaScript gets priority?
Say again?
JavaScript gets priority by loading.
No, JavaScript doesn't get priority when loading. Everything in the HTML file is processed in the order it appears in the file. Because we put this script at the end of the file, it is the last thing to execute after the heading has been loaded. So if the heading has been loaded, where is it? That's the difference. Loading is different from displaying. It's been loaded into memory, but it hasn't been displayed yet. Displaying is the very last thing that the browser will do after it's loaded the entire contents of the web page. So, as soon as we hit this OK button, there we go. There's our web page. Make sense? Good. And of course, if we take a look at console, you will see that hello world appears. So far, so good? Excellent. Now, the advantages of externalizing your JavaScript are the same as externalizing your CSS. I won't dwell on it too long because I'm pretty sure they probably hammered you pretty hard with that in HTML and CSS, am I right? Yeah. So, to make a JavaScript file, new file, let's call it babiesfirst.js. Save it to the same directory.
Is it capital J and lowercase J, right?
Yes, lowercase js. File extensions kind of don't really matter, really. Like, you could load like a .pdf if it was encoded as JavaScript underneath the file extension. You know, you could still load it as a PDF if you really wanted to. It depends on like whether the program doing the loading is doing like hard checking for file extensions. But anyway, take this content, cut, paste, save, save, then source is equal to babiesfirst.js. Just because there's no content here does not mean you get to omit the end script tag. The end script tag is still necessary. So, save that, reload, and you can see we have the same thing happening again. Make sense? There we go. Here, I'll split left, right. Although there's really not much interesting going on in the HTML here. Question?
So we should be putting the script link at the bottom of our HTML page? not
For now.
at the head.
Yeah. Later on, we're going to learn how to use a special event, the I am finished loading this file event to execute JavaScript code. It's like later we're going to learn how to load functions and then execute them on completion of loading the page. But we need events to do that. So for now, that's where we're going to put it. That's like, this is like intro level hacky way of doing it. Not the proper way of doing it, but you know, this is the level we are at right now. So, any questions? Yes.
So can we alter the timing those?
Can you alter the timing of the loading of the JS? Yes, by moving this script around. So if you put the script up here, you can load the JS, you know, before you load the HTML elements. If you put the, you know, if you, for example, you know, if you have a script and then you like have a link, and like if you load some JS and then you load some CSS, the JS will be loaded and executed before the CSS is applied, right? And that means that this thing might override CSS properties you set inside of your script, right? So in general, my recommendation is load all of your CSS first and then apply your JavaScript, because generally speaking, you will want your JavaScript to have final say on what your styling rules are. Make sense? Good. Like, I won't rule out that it's useful to do it the other way in some circumstances, but as a general rule, your JavaScript should come after your CSS because you want it to take priority. Excellent question. So, so let's talk about JavaScript as a language. So, JavaScript is an imperative and object-oriented language. It's actually, I would say, redundant to say imperative and object-oriented, because all object-oriented languages are, like object-oriented is a system of organizing imperative code. All object-oriented code requires imperative code, but you know, basically, the way that you were using Java last semester is imperative. The way that you're using Java this semester will be object-oriented and has started becoming object-oriented. But in this class, we won't really be doing much in the way of object-oriented programming in JavaScript. This class has been designed not to really cross-pollinate that much with Java. The programming skills that are more directly applicable here are the ones from Python last semester. The programs that you write here will be primarily functions. You'll write a bunch of functions, you'll hook them up to events. This will require your programming skills from Python, but we're not going to really get into methods. We will use them certainly, but we won't write many of our own. We won't worry about inheritance too awful much, except insofar as it affects CSS rules. All of these sort of advanced object-oriented concepts, we're not really going to worry about too much here. If you can figure out how to apply them, though, your code will be better, and better code is easier to debug and gets higher marks on assignments. Make sense? So, JavaScript has C-like syntax. Java also has C-like syntax. What it's going to feel like, you know, very shortly, is that you're programming Python, like it's Python under the surface, but you're using Java's syntax. That's what it's going to feel like. right? So all of the stuff that we talked about in Java in week 2, for loops, while loops, do whiles, switches, if statements, these are all common to Java and JavaScript. So when you write a for loop, it will be a Java for loop, not a Python for loop. Similarly, things like the Boolean operators follow Java rather than Python. So when you want to do Boolean and, what characters do you use? 2 ampersands. Or 2 vertical bar characters, yes. There's probably a fancy name for it, but I don't know the fancy name. Pipes, yes, thank you. 2 pipes. So, variable names do not need prepended $signs, but that's only interesting to you if you already know PHP. For some reason in PHP, all variables need a $sign to start them off. This is also true in bash scripting. So unless you know either bash scripting or PHP, this statement is meaningless. Variables are just variables. So in addition, so to speak, in addition to being used for addition, the plus sign operator is also string concatenation, just like it is in Java, right? And just like in Java, using the concatenation operator between something that is a string and something that is not a string forces the thing that's not a string to become a string. It forces string conversion. For example, 1 plus 1 is 2, but sarcastic 1 plus 1 is 11. Right. It's, this isn't, so, yes, but also operator precedence it applies. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 21, right? Because the first plus operation will occur between 2 integer types. The result of that is 2. So then it's 2 plus 1, 1 in quotes. So that's concatenation, so you end up with 21. The string, yeah. If you want to interpret a string as an integer, which is something you very likely will want to do, number dot parse int or float five yields the number 5, which you can then add numbers to in the regular sense. Notice that we're using number, not integer, and not double. We'll get to that. Also, note that if I'm trying to parse as an integer something that isn't an integer, does anybody know what this stands for?
Not a number.
Correct. Not a number. Not a number is a value. So, is this thing still recording? Just curious. Yep. Still good. So, not a number is a value. It's a bit like a null, but it only comes up when you try to apply like numeric operations to things that aren't numbers. Here's a fun one. There's a test for not a number, is not a number. There we go. Is not a number. So, no parameter given to is not a number yields true. not a number is true. 6 is not a number, but also number is not a number. That's a JavaScript joke, right? Number is not a number, true. Okay, so here's one for you, right? Empty square braces is an empty list, right? Boolean not on an empty list is false. Two Boolean nots on an empty list is true. And also, empty curly braces is an empty object. You can do similar things with that too. Once you have Boolean logic, you can actually write all programs. So it is possible in JavaScript to write programs exclusively in these 3 characters, like entirely in these 3 characters. I wouldn't recommend it on an assignment though. So all of this is to demonstrate that JavaScript has a very weak type system. It's a weakly typed language. It's just weak. Anyway, strings can use double or single quotes just like in Python. Semicolons are optional in most cases, but good practice dictates that you should use them anyway. Good JavaScript code looks like Java code. JavaScript is dynamically typed, weakly dynamically typed. We can declare variables 3 different ways actually. There's the let keyword, the global keyword, and the var keyword, all of which declare a variable. So, unlike Python, where the first use of a variable just declares it, in JavaScript you are still required to declare your variable. The difference is, because it's weakly typed, you don't have to declare it with a data type. So that's the purpose of let, global, and var. These declare variables without specifying a type. Just like Python, the type is the type that you assign to it. Make sense? So far, so good? The supported data types include Boolean, number, string, object, null, and undefined. So note that null and undefined are separate types. Right? We'll get into some cool examples of it warping up when we start doing some examples. But note that we have a data type number, which is both integers and doubles. Right? Clearly, JavaScript understands that there is a distinction between integers and doubles because you can parse either an integer or a double, but, you know, it's kind of like the thing where it's also pretending characters and strings are the same thing when they're not, you know? But, yeah, anyway. Number. So, because it's weakly typed, JavaScript does some interesting things. In Java, let me just grab marker. So in Java, 5 is equal to 5. What would I get if I tried executing that? Yes.
A variable with the name 5 that's type string. Just a guess.
A variable with the name 5 that's...
Like a variable type string, because you like assign it a string, but like it's 5 the name of the variable? Or no?
That's a double equals.
Oh, okay.
So,
Sorry.
like, if 5 is equal to 5, where 1 is a string and 1 is an integer. Yes?
So does it give you like a true false value?
Does it? That's what I'm asking.
I think so. If it's false.
I think it's a true.
It's a syntax error. Incompatible type error. You can't compare strings and integers. So, what happens when we try it in JavaScript? True. Despite the fact that there is a world of difference between the integer 5 and the number 5, or the character 5. So, please don't shoot the messenger, all right? I know that what I'm about to say is going to ruffle some feathers. JavaScript has a triple equals operator. 5 triple equals the string 5 comes out false. Double equals is a test to see if the value is the same. Triple equals tests both value and type. So, you know, you might have some interesting things like false is equal to undefined. False. Oh, no, I'll show you some interesting other ones. But, so, yeah, triple equals requires both of the types to be the same, whereas double equals doesn't somehow. So really, the double equals in Java is more closely equivalent to a triple equals in JavaScript than the double equals in JavaScript. Yes?
If it was 5.0 double equals 5 string, would that be true or false?
Let's try it. True.
And then if it was 5.1, it would be false.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
it's just comparing the values, not the types.
So even if
Right.
it's an integer double, it doesn't matter, it's just comparing if this same number is exact.
Okay, so here's a quick quiz. 5.0 equals 5 is true, double equals. 5.0 triple equals 5 is also true, despite the fact they're different types. Yes?
Because a double can read an integer, but an integer can't.
Why?
Because there's only one type of variable type for number in JavaScript.
That's right. There's only one type for numbers in JavaScript called number. Very good. These are both numbers. So in Java, we would draw a distinction between this guy and that guy. That is a double, that is an integer. These are not the same type. In JavaScript, this proves that they're the same type. All right? Sound good? Is everybody's brain exploded yet?
Yes.
Only a
Yeah.
little.
Well, you have a whole course to figure this stuff out, so. But yeah, so, and this is kind of like, this is the reason that I hate these weakly typed languages. It's like, it's actually like they pretend like it's less work, that you don't have to worry about the type system. right? That you don't have to worry about strict typing. That's like the supposed advantage of a type system like this. But you still have to do that work anyways. It's just in your brain instead of on the paper, right? It's not like you don't need to know what the types going on are. You still need to know that, right? Excellent example. A lot of what we're going to be doing with JavaScript is modifying DOM element attributes, right? You know, like image source. That's an attribute, right? Even if those things look like they should be numbers, they will parse out of the HTML as strings. In some cases, but not in others. For example, if you have these the slide bar input element, that gives you an integer, right? But a lot of other things will just give you a string that encodes an integer. So if you're not aware that you're dealing with a string, if you think you're dealing with an integer and you add something to it and then put it back, you know, like a regular counter, right? You're gonna get like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, you know? This is the type of stuff you actually do have to be aware of in JavaScript. Make sense? Hopefully? To an extent?
To the extent.
Good.
To the extent that
Hopefully to a sufficient extent that the exam might be passed. So. We haven't really talked about arrays in Java yet, but arrays in JavaScript will follow much more closely arrays or lists in Python. So basically just think of them as lists in Python. Forget that they're even called arrays and everything will be good. You use square braces for that. Let's see how to do that very quickly. My understanding of the Python course is that it doesn't do lists a whole awful lot.
no. We did it more so towards like the end
Yeah.
of the semester, like probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks possibly.
Yeah.
But strings, like I think the string slicing, we didn't do much of that until the final exam.
Well, at the moment we're like, so working with lists is an absolutely essential skill for programmers, but it's it's a harder thing to do. We're going to be doing that in Java in not too much time, but this is, so basically if you just want to save a list, let x equal and then a list literal. You can also, as I showed, you can also have an empty list that contains nothing. And then x at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is undefined, right? Elsewhere, if you tried to access outside the bounds of a list, you would produce something like an out-of-bounds exception. But in JavaScript, you simply get an undefined literal being returned. And of course, just like everything else, we're using zero indexing here. Make sense? This bit about undefined is really quite tricky. What it actually means when you get an undefined return, something to return undefined, it will still attempt to perform the rest of the calculation using undefined, which means that undefined will probably be carried through to your final result, but it will be not obvious where it came from, right? This is one of the things that's super tricky about programming in JavaScript, right? Because if you have a reasonably lengthed calculation that returns undefined at the end, the only recourse you have is to do a bunch of print statements to see the intermediate values, see where the undefined is being introduced, right? Because it's not failing out on an error, and it's not telling you on what line number that bad boy is being produced. So, question?
Can you access the end of the list by just doing like a negative, or?
I don't know, maybe. I don't think so, but let's try it. Nope, undefined.
So you just have to go through like the whole list then.
Or you can do x.length minus 1. That's actually what the negative indexing in Python is short for. So, yes, question. List in Java and list in JavaScript? Yeah, so the way that you define an array in Java, we haven't quite gotten there yet in class yet, but this is the syntax for it. If you have an integer array x is equal to a new int array of size 10, right? That's how you would declare it here. That's how you declare it in Java, right? And it's a different data structure. Arrays in JavaScript have a whole bunch of methods, right? Like push and pop, for instance, or reverse.
So what's the difference between array
Could you?
and list?
I'm sorry. Could you speak up a bit?
What's the difference between list and array in JavaScript?
So, the difference between a list and an array in JavaScript is that JavaScript doesn't have arrays, it just has lists. It calls them arrays, and that's confusing. So, in general, the difference between an array and a list is something you'll learn in data structures and algorithms. I'm not sure I want to get into the whole discussion of it here, but very quickly, all that an array is a group of continuous memory, and you access individual elements of it by calculating an offset and then reading that memory. Arrays do not have methods, right? Lists do. Lists are dynamic data structures that can be grown and shrunk dynamically as execution dictates. And that's because underlying a list is normally some form of linked list. So a linked list is made of nodes. Each node contains a reference to the next node, and that's how the data structure is laid out, as opposed to an array, which is just one continuous chunk of memory. Again, not super important right now. You'll get into it when you talk about data structures and algorithms. For now, it's just a thing that you put multiple things in, right? Just use it the same way that you are using them in Python.
So the thing which has methods is list, and things which doesn't have a method is array.
Yeah, like arrays in Java, we're not going to have, we're not going to have these types of methods available. Arrays in Java, like you also have array lists and lists in Java, which do have methods, but just kind of a native array in Java is really just a collection of primitive data types. So, good question. Any other questions? Okay. So, further, if you want access to math functions, you use the same way, basically you do the same thing you do in Java. Math dot and then whichever function you want. Random, square root, power, floor, ceiling, max, min, trigonometric functions, logarithmic functions, all of your sort of standard math kit is math dot and then the method name. Make sense? Good. So, now let's talk about functions. A function in JavaScript is very similar to a function in Python. If you took out the keyword function and replaced that with def, took out the colon here and replaced it with curly braces, and of course, the semicolon is optional. Basically, if you squint at this, you can see a Python function definition, right? This is good. This is fine. We can write some functions. Let me write one right now. Function. Function hello. Hello name. Why are you crossing that out? Name is deprecated. I don't care. There we go. No longer deprecated. So, hello, my name. Save that. Reload the page. Hello. Walrus. The walrus. There you go. Hopefully this comes as no surprise or shock. This is like standard computing as we've done it so far. So, let's have some fun. They're like, it's never actually fun when you say, let's have some fun, sir. It's like, I know. I'm the one having fun. And isn't that what's really important? Yeah. Another very, very basic function. Add 3 takes x, y, and z, returns x plus y plus z. So, add 3, 1, 2, 3, yields 6. So, do you folks remember overloading? Good. I hope so, because it's going to be on the test today. Yes? You getting an error? Let me see here. Oh, yeah, well, we've got X, Y, Z up here and A, B, C down there. Got to be consistent. So, overloading is the ability to call a function with multiple different type signatures. The way that we do this in Java is, frankly, somewhat painful. We must define our function separately for every type signature that we want to accept. In JavaScript, things are a lot more loose. Basically, it will take the number of arguments you provide, and if you don't supply enough, it will insert undefined for the rest of them. If you provide too many arguments, it just ignores the ones that you provide over the number of arguments it's supposed to take. So, let's see how that works. So if I add 3 and add a few more arguments, you can see that the return result is still 6. That is because the 4th, 5th, and 6th arguments are simply being dropped. They're not used, so they're not there, right? In Java, this would be a syntax error. Too many arguments have been applied, right? If not enough arguments have been applied, oh, I can't edit that, pardon me. If not enough arguments have been applied, then our result here is not a number. What's happening, we have 1 plus 2 plus undefined. Not a number is what you get when you try to perform numeric calculations on things that are not numeric. Undefined is not numeric, therefore 3 plus undefined. So we can do this actually. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus undefined, not a number. Right? That's what's happening under the hood. So here's a question. What if one of these is a string? So if a string gets mixed in, those arithmetic addition operators get converted to concatenation operators. So we are concatenating 1, 2, and undefined. You would think that undefined, when you concatenated it with something, would yield some kind of failure status. No! It just inserts the word undefined into the string. So there you go. Not a number also converts to a string this way. So there you go. Question?
So can undefined be, can you give it like can you use it as like a variable, like make undefined equals 5, like, or something like that for like a string? Like, can you change it in that sense?
You can test for it. You can say, if x is equal to undefined, although you may wish to do triple equals x is equal to undefined, then do stuff, and that stuff might be, add a 5 instead of an undefined. But there's a better way. Undefined is the thing which JavaScript inserts by default when it is not supplied enough parameters for a function. You can also tell JavaScript what non-undefined default parameters should be using an equal sign inside the function declaration. So, for example, if I say x's default is 1, y's default is 2, and z's default is 3, there we go, reload the page, then add 3 with no arguments applied whatsoever, still yields 6. But I have the ability to override these default parameters by supplying my own. Make sense? Maybe? So, incidentally, this also works in Python.
So how does that work then? So if you don't put any parameters, it would be 6.
So if I don't, yeah,
And then if you put another number in, then it changes to 7. So, okay, so then you can put in 1 or 2 values, and then it just changes from there.
so yes. So this is how it works, right? If add3 is called with no parameters, the value of A, the value of B, and the value of C are all taken from the default values supplied here. I should call these X, Y, and Z. X, Y, Z. So that's 1, 2, 3. So we return 6. If I say add 3 supplying a 7, this 7 gets mapped to the first argument x. So we have a 7 there. We don't have any further ones. So instead of inserting undefined, we pull the definitions here and here. So basically 2 and 3 remain unchanged. So then that's 7 plus 2 plus 3, which is, of course, 12. If we call add3 with 7 and 10, you can probably pick up the pattern. The first argument gets placed in the first argument, so that's a 7. The second argument gets placed in the second argument, so that's 10. No more are provided, so we go to the default value for Z, which is 3, because we defined it to be, otherwise it would be undefined. So we calculate that, and our answer is 20.
So that's like, that would be overlooked, kind of.
Yeah, so this is a more dynamic approach to overloading, right? In Java, we would have to in order to get this, we would have to define the add3 method 4 times. Once with no arguments, once with 1 argument, once with 2 arguments, and once with 3 arguments. Even if these overloaded definitions all ultimately redirect to each other, this still, like, you would still need to write out all of those type signatures. In JavaScript, we get all of that from one function definition. Question?
What if you leave one space open?
Say again?
What if you leave one space open?
What if you have only one space open?
No, you leave one space open.
Oh, you can't. I don't think so. Maybe it does the same thing Python does. Let's see here. X is equal to 7 and Z is equal to 10. Does it do this? Is that correct? No. So in Python, the way that you can do that is you can like take the name of the argument and use, argument name equals this in the call, and that way you can like leave a space. But it doesn't seem to work that way in JavaScript because I get the same result both times.
So
So
if you just added an extra comma after the 7, so that it would not like show that there's 3 numbers, but 1 is missing.
I mean, do you want to put an undefined in there?
Sure. So then that's,
So somehow,
so then it's 7, 2, 10, 20.
If you leave this space
Right.
open,
because, oh yeah, that works actually. Okay, so we found out how to do it. Okay, so this is reason 3422 why JavaScript is terrible. If you want to omit an argument, you provide undefined as its value. If it receives an undefined here, it will substitute the default value found over there.
So if you did undefined, comma, undefined, comma, undefined, it would still print out 1, 2, or so it would print out 6. Essentially.
Yes! Because that's the same as leaving it blank, as far as the interpreter is concerned, right? When it's got a blank space, it interprets that as an undefined anyway. So an undefined sent to the function definition will insert the default value. So yeah. All right. I hereby, by the power vested in me by Mohawk College and the authorities pertaining thereto, declare a 10-minute break. Please be back here by 10:48, and we shall continue.
Careful, you get hit with the stick.
Okay. Now, what's your very important course-related question?
My question is, are we able to insert comments?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yes, comments, absolutely. Comments are C-style comments, just like in Java. Just exactly like Java. Also very much like C. Those are your comments in JavaScript. Man, this smoke. For those of you, for the purposes of posterity in this video, all of the wildfires that are currently raging around the country have caused a smoke cloud to descend upon Hamilton and try to choke the life out of us. But like, I've already been trying to choke the life out of myself for quite some time because I'm working on my basement right now, doing like insulation and drywalling, and like, you know, my lungs are already half filled with drywall plaster, so
Some smoke in there too.
yeah. It's just not a good time for my lungs right now.
I gotta say, you should write like an e-book or something. I feel like you have a
Yeah.
good storytelling voice.
Yeah,
Well,
I was gonna say that does sound like a apocalyptic movie or
Fiction or
something.
something.
oh, I've always wanted to write like hard-boiled detective fiction.
I'll read it.
Okay, you can be my proofreader.
As long as it's an audiobook, I'm in.
That's fair. Okay, anyway, so, back to JavaScript. See all the university students? I'm happy here. I really am.
As the tier streams down.
Yeah, well, once I put it up on YouTube, a bunch of people who are still subscribed to this channel will probably see it. Like, I've got like over 1,000 subs.
Yeah,
So.
1.13 subscribers. Do you monetize your videos?
Oh yeah. I have made nearly $200.
Pretty good.
Thank you. Yeah. It's kind of interesting actually. I sometimes get like questions, like technical questions from people who are just like watching through old videos and like watching through my lecture courses. It's interesting. But anyway, I just keep them up there for posterity, you know. But so JavaScript, yes, very good, very serious. Exercise. So, I've decided what I'm going to do, with respect to the camera at least. I'm going to like just shut off recording while we're working on an exercise, and then when we take it up again, I'll turn the recording back on. I think that, because then I still don't have to do any editing because I wrote a shell script that'll stitch all of the video components together. So, you know, because I'm a nerd and also lazy. So, I'm actually not that lazy, but dull, repetitive work, that's what a computer is for. So, here we are, exercises. So this first one's going to seem kind of crude and simple, but, you know, you got to start somewhere. I can really smell it now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Feels like we're at camp.
yeah, really.
Shouldn't feel like that.
We're in a city,
Yeah.
you know?
Apparently the Hamilton Public School Board to keep students indoors while in our school, because yesterday.
Christ.
I'm surprised that
Indoor
was
recess,
So, our first JavaScript exercise. Write me a JavaScript program in an external JavaScript file. Load it into the a web page using a script element. So far, so good. The script file should define a function which takes one parameter n. This is going to be a number. If the parameter is an even integer, it should say hello world n times. Otherwise, it should say goodbye world once. Once you have defined this function, write a loop that calls this function with the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We will take the next 10 or 15 minutes to accomplish this goal. So, get to. You too. All right, let's take it up. So, we are writing a function called hello, so I already have one called hello, so I'll use that, I guess. Takes one parameter n. Very good, so far so good. Now, we want to do one thing if n is even and another thing if n is odd, so obviously we will be using if statement, yes, very much. If n mod 2 is equal to 0, we do one thing, otherwise we do something else. Now, if it's even, we want to print hello world n times. So we want to print hello world, console.print log hello world. Hello worlds, that's fine. We want to do that n times. How do we do that? For loop. For var int, or var I is equal to 0, I is less than n, I plus plus. There we go. Note the difference between the for loop in Java and JavaScript. In Java, we provide the integer data type because we have to provide a data type. In JavaScript, we do not provide a data type, but we still need to declare it as a variable. Hence the var keyword. Good. And otherwise, we print console.log goodbye, cruel world. Question?
Yeah. Why did you use bar instead of let?
Personal preference.
Both are correct.
I think both will have the same effect here, yeah. But let's test it. So if I call hello with 8, I get 8 hello worlds. If I call it with 5, I get one of those. Please note, the number here is the number of times this console message appears. If a console message is repeated multiple times without any console messages in the middle, that's how the console will generally show it. So, pardon me. That will get very useful once we start doing timing. which we might even get to today. Where was I? Ah, yes. Let. Yeah, let and var are interchangeable here.
Where not?
Hmm? Where are they not?
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll find out.
On the guide at the bottom, it said like let is a new version of to replace var, but you can or something like that.
Oh, did it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, let's see this here.
I'm not ready.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is. The let keyword is a new keyword intended to replace the old var keyword. You should always use let, but a lot of the code you will find online still uses var.
Okay.
Oh, well, there you go. I'm just old.
Old fashioned.
Yeah, I'm old-fashioned. I will attempt then to use let instead of var so that I can be a modern hip youngster like all the rest of you.
Love it.
Yes. Hello, fellow young people.
Hello, other young person.
There we go. So, I'm actually not that old, but I have the soul of like a 200-year-old, you know. I'm really looking forward to being a grumpy old man, you know. Because like once you hit like 85, you can like actually hit people with your cane, and nobody will do anything because you're 85, right?
Sure. I think you get away with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. 60. Well, 65. 60 is the new. 60 is the new 50. So, you know. Anyway, so the other thing that we had to do was to test this thing 5 times using 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. For let. Let just sounds wrong. Okay, fine.
Sounds biblical.
I guess if you read it out, let x equal 1
Yeah.
or something.
Let x equals 0 and x was 0.
In the beginning.
Yes.
There was X.
In the beginning there was x and x was 0. Oh, did I tell you guys the Fortran joke?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good.
We'll hear it again if you'd like.
Okay, for the benefit of the internet audience, there's this old ancient language called Fortran, and in Fortran variables are double essentially unless you declare them with other data type. So like the default data type for everything is double, but they don't call it double, they call it real. So because real number is like what you call it in mathematics. So the joke is that God is real unless declared integer.
Never gets old.
Yeah. Ooh, I've got another one actually. Okay, I've got another. Here's a quick joke for you. All right. So a pilot is flying the plane, coming in for a landing. Right. He's sweating. He's like, I don't know if we're gonna make it. So his co-pilot's like, I don't know. This is pretty tough. They come in for the landing. They land the plane. The pilot says, my God, that was the shortest runway I've ever landed on. And the co-pilot was like, yeah, and it was so wide.
Oh my god.
So, that's like a classic joke, you know? Like classically structured joke. For loop calls this guy 5 times, 1 to 5. Well, actually, it should be less than or equals 5, like so. There we go. Reload, and you can see it calls it all appropriately. Make sense? This is what everyone else in this room should see, except for the cruelty. But you know, whenever it's on my end, there's always a little bit of cruelty involved. Right. Let's let's continue. So, this is another thing that you can do in Python. It's a lot more rare, but you can declare functions within functions. This is generally what we call a helper function, right? So if you just need, if you feel the need to write a function to abstract some subroutine, you can actually scope that function so that it doesn't exist outside of the function you've declared it in. If you're the type of person that likes to lock things down and keep people from accessing your stuff, this is a great way of doing it. Again, the same thing works in Python. Further, a fun thing that you can do is to pass a function to another function as an argument. So, for those of you who know other programming languages, this is a function pointer, right? So the function name is always a pointer to that function. We can pass function pointers into functions as arguments. Again, you can do the same thing in Python. All right? So this gets a little confusing though. Basically, we have to start writing our functions as if they don't know what function is being passed in, rather than knowing that we want to call a particular function in another function. So, here's an example. Just gonna comment that out. So, let's write a function. Function add to x and y, return x plus y. Function sub to x and y, return x subtract y. Is it just me, or is it actually getting a little harder to breathe? A little bit, yeah. I don't feel like I'm anxious, and I'm not like prone to it, but like, I don't know, it does feel kind of like smoky in here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Postpone the test?
Wish I could, man.
Let's all
Wish I
just
could.
fake pass out during.
Please don't. If I have people pass out, I have to fill out a form.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Well,
it's like
it's
it's like the health and safety form I had to fill out at the university when I literally fell in a hole. You want to hear my falling in a hole story? Okay, so I was minding my own business, walking to the parking lot, right, to my car, and I was cutting across grass, and in the grass, there was a concrete pad with manhole covers on it, right? And I'm not suspecting anything, I just walk across the thing, because why wouldn't you? Turns out one of them wasn't secured. So the manhole cover, flips up into a vertical position. My foot goes right in, I get in this, it was electrical, not sewer, thankfully. But I'm into this thing up to my friggin' waist. And it's like I could have broken a leg, you know?
Yeah.
And
I got trapped down there too.
yeah, well, I mean, I was, it was small enough that there was no danger of me falling completely into it, but I could have very well easily broken a leg. So I talked to the McMaster physical plant people, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll fix it. And I go back 2 days later, and I check it, still unsecured. So I just leave it flipped up, right? And this becomes my routine with them, because for about a week and a half, every time I went by that manhole cover, I would flip it up, and every time I came back, someone had flipped it back down. And by the time a week and a half of this had gone on, I found that they had finally bolted the thing down. And I was like, good. Yeah. I should have sued though.
Maybe there was a quest.
Maybe there was a what?
Quest.
A quest? A quest at the bottom of it? Yeah. Maybe it's like the new Zelda game where it was if I just climbed down inside the well, I would have gotten some good resources. Yeah. Oh my god.
Should have pressed F.
The new Zelda game looks cool, I must say. My wife is playing it at the moment. Because she's a nerd. So I've got these two functions, add to and subtract to. Both take the same number of arguments. I can write a third function, apply function, takes f, a, and b. Returns the result of f applying a and b. Now you will notice that normally we kind of think of function names as something locked down and different from variables. But here, I have a variable, right? And I'm using it as a function. That's what the round braces actually means. That's an operator that means call this thing as if it were a function. Right? So,
Can you repeat the last one?
yes. So, normally, we don't think of function names as being variables. In this case, we're using a variable name like it's a function. These round braces are actually an operator that says, call this variable assuming it's a function. Right? So, obviously some things you can call a function on, some things you can't. Let's see if this is one of the rare instances where we can actually get JavaScript to give us an actual bona fide error. So, apply function. 1, 2, 3. There we go. We finally were able to coax a type error out of the thing. So if we supply something that's not a function, like the number 1, and we attempt to call it like it's a function, we will actually get a type error. But if we supply the name of another function, for example, add 2, we get 5. If we supply sub2, we get -1. Is this making sense?
Yes.
Good. So you may be saying to yourself, okay, for about the 5th or 6th time this morning, the professor has shown me an overly complex way to do basic arithmetic. How on earth could this apply? The question is, what are the sorts of things that take functions as arguments? And the answer is events. So when you write an event handler in JavaScript, it will require the name of a function to execute if that event happens. The most basic type of event in JavaScript are timing events. A timing event, you've got 2 flavors of timing event. You've got set interval and set timeout. Set interval will call a particular function every so many milliseconds. Set timeout will call this function after so many milliseconds once. So, for example, hello is still in scope, right? Yes. So, set interval, provide the function hello, call that every, well, I think I need something without arguments at the moment, actually. Let's see here. I will make a new function, less hellos. Console.log just one hello for you. I guess it should be fewer hellos. If we want to be grammatically correct. So. You can see that set interval with the function name with 1,000 milliseconds as the second argument calls this function once per second, which is kind of cool, right?
Is that what the one there is for?
Oh, no, that's the return value of the set interval function. The return value of the set interval function is actually a reference to this this interval behavior. If you save it into a variable, then you can cancel the interval later on using another function. But we're not going to talk about that just yet. But it does have a value. It does have a purpose. Make sense?
And 1,000 is that's milliseconds, you said?
Correct.
And it's always like that?
Yes.
Okay.
That's always in milliseconds, yes. Similarly, set timeout. Let me write another function. Function annoying. Console dot, or no, not console dot. Alert. Something annoying. Hold my finger. Set interval. Annoying. Or not set interval, set timeout. And after 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So, have you ever been trying to read news articles on the internet and you get through like 2 sentences maybe and it pops up with like, to read the rest you must subscribe? That's set timeout. So, it's being used for evil. But it is not itself evil, just like everything else in science. Everything in science is neither good nor evil, but can be put to either good or evil purposes. Except for AI. AI is just evil.
Can you set a certain amount in the console for the set intervals? Like if you do it every millisecond, it just keeps going and going and going, but is there a spot where it can stop? Or we just have to set them up?
I can do this in the file, but not in, like, it's too complicated in the console. I'll show you how to do that. Have something repeat X number of times. So, let's say, let interval reference equal set interval this one every 500 milliseconds, so every half second. Then into this function, we say let x equal 0. Every time this function gets called, increase x, x plus plus. If x is greater than or equal to 10, for example, clear interval and then we grab the reference name. Interval reference. And if I've dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's, boom. Sorry, let me repeat that for you.
So let interval.
Yeah, and then it stops.
Can you scroll down the code a little?
Yeah, let me just grab this and put it up here. Yeah. So that's the code you're looking for.
In the console, it's right?
Clear interval. Clear interval.
And then in the console, like when you call it, in the console, you say is that highlighted?
Oh no, this way, this is configured to start to execute when the page is reloaded. You don't activate this through console.
Mine says set interval is not defined. Oh wait,
You may have misspelled it.
yeah, it is.
Cool? Any questions? So we've already got some very interesting stuff in JavaScript, and we've only really scratched the surface, right? Try doing that in CSS, even with CSS animations. Yes? Can I go over the set interval? Oh, clear interval? Yeah, okay. So, you should get used to this style of thinking because it comes up a lot in JavaScript. The return result of the set interval function is a reference to this interval object. You can think of this as creating an object that will continually run this function, right? Here, we are saving a reference to that object and calling it interval reference, right? When I execute clear interval, the passed argument is the reference to the interval I want to clear, right? So, because I save the reference here, and then I clear it up here, when this X counter hits 11, this line of code is executed, the interval object is destroyed, and the repeating behavior no longer happens. But the function is still defined. So you could set it up again if you wanted to. Does that make sense?
Clear interval is a method?
Yeah, they're like methods, functions, yeah.
It's not popping up when you are writing, just
You're not getting it popping up?
if this is a method,
Yeah, clear interval. Question?
So in JavaScript, you don't need to put a main as long as there's something in the function. It'll like run automatically once you reset the page.
So in JavaScript, it does the same sleight of hand that Python does. It's not that there's no main function, it's that the whole file is the main function. Like in a very technical sense, operating systems must call a main function in the program to start the program. That's a requirement for the that's how the operating system knows how to start your program, is it calls main, right? So these languages that don't have an explicit main function, it's not that they don't have it, it's just that they're hiding it. So in the case of both Python and JavaScript, the whole file is main. So like in JavaScript, you could imagine like the interpreter writes in line 0 function main open curly brace, and then on the last line it closes that curly brace, right? But it does that for you in such a manner as to make you think that it doesn't exist. I don't like when things hide things, you know? Put it out in the open so I can debug it, please. So, these are good questions. Are there any more questions?
Your camera.
My camera? What about? Did it run out of juice? Oh, it's flashing. It's flipping between modes. That's interesting. Oh, that's going to be annoying to anybody watching, isn't it? Let's see here. Oh my goodness. 1 second. Like, is it just the LCD screen? Sorry, you're just going to have to deal with the color flipping like that. I can't figure out what the setting is in class. I'll have to figure it out later. Thank you for noticing that. Am I still in frame? Yeah. Maybe if I like open the blind, I think it's like I'm between light settings or something.
Still. It went down a little bit, but it's still
Yeah. Oh, less frequently is good. Okay. It's not the battery. All right. Where was I? Exercises. So, exercise numero dos. Create 2 JavaScript functions, heads and tails, using let syntax. Oh, actually, we didn't go over that. So, all right. Here's let syntax. It's not really that useful yet, but it will be later. The idea of an anonymous function will come up later. But basically, this here, right? This function is equivalent to the following. Let annoying to equal function Oh wow, we're actually almost out of class, aren't we? So,
That's just another way of naming functions.
yeah. So, if you say function annoying, or let annoying equal function, these are both saying the same thing slightly different ways. Annoying, so this is like regular syntax, but here we're binding annoying to a variable. One difference here is you could like make a function global or local based on whether you use let or global, right? But otherwise, these two both behave the exact same way. The difference is that you can use anonymous functions. So when you declare a function but you don't specify a function name, that's an anonymous function. You can use these in set intervals. So for example, if you don't want to define a whole function just for the set interval, you can do something like this. Set interval function there for, every 100, every second, console.print or log anonymous functions are cool, as is this room. Arf, arf, snarfle. So we didn't have to define a function on the exterior, right? We defined the function in place where we set the interval. As we go through the course, you'll see that this is actually a much more common way of doing this sort of thing. This is also the way that standard event handlers like click events will typically be done. But it's not the only way to do it. You can also save it to a function and use the function name. You don't have to use an anonymous function. But if you are, for example, looking up how to do your homework on the internet, like you shouldn't be, you will find that this is often what they will give you. Make sense? Any questions? I'm going to use the I'm going to use the last 2 minutes of class to end the class early and say, for those 2 extra minutes, study for your test. That's in an hour. Please show up to the test room a little bit early. All right? If you don't show up on time, I'm not giving you extra time.
And that's still in that I wing, right?
It's in the same room that we usually are.
Like the new one that we just got into.
Yeah, it's, wait, I'll look at the, it's I-112, I think, right? That one?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, take her easy, folks.
You.